Welcome. Settle into a comfortable position, whether you're lying down or sitting up. If it feels right, gently close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath in. Feel your chest rise as your lungs fill. Then softly exhale, letting go of any tension you've been holding. Before we continue, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're from and what time you're watching it. Always great to connect with you. Now, take another deep breath in and exhale slowly, releasing any lingering stress. Feel your shoulders relax, your jaw loosen, and the tension in your forehead fade away. With each breath, notice your body growing heavier, sinking deeper into relaxation. Let your mind drift freely, like a leaf floating on a calm, steady stream, carried effortlessly. Simply listen to the sound of my voice and allow yourself to be gently guided. Black Hollow wasn't the kind of place you'd find on a postcard, tucked between jagged cliffs and a restless sea. It was a town forgotten by time, where the air always carried the faint stench of salt and decay. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the gray veil, a cursed mist said to swallow those who dared to wrong the sea. But to Clara Voss, it was just another superstition, another story to debunk. Clara hadn't been back to Black Hollow in over a decade. She'd left as soon as she could, chasing a career as a journalist and burying the memories of her mother's disappearance. But when she received a cryptic letter from her childhood friend Jonah, she knew she had to return. The letter was short, just 3 words. She arrived during the town's annual Drowning Festival, a grim tradition where effigies of drowned sailors were burned to appease the sea. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and salt, and the townsfolk moved like shadows, their faces drawn and uneasy. That night, as the last embers of the bonfire faded, the fog rolled in. It wasn't like any fog Clara had seen before. It was thick, almost oily, and it moved with a purpose. By morning, it hadn't lifted. Instead, it clung to the town like a suffocating blanket, swallowing streets and houses whole. The first disappearance happened that afternoon. Old Man Hargrove, the town's fisherman, stepped out to check his nets and never returned. His wife found his boots on the dock, filled with seawater. The townsfolk locked their doors, whispering about the gray veil. But Clara wasn't convinced. She was a journalist. After all, she needed proof. That night, as she sat in her childhood home, she heard a voice in the fog. It was faint, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "Clara, help me." It was her mother's voice. Clara's blood ran cold. She hadn't heard that voice in over 20 years. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the fog wrapping around her like a cold, wet hand. The voice called again, closer this time. She followed it, her heart pounding in her chest, until she reached the edge of the cliffs. There, in the swirling mist, she saw them shadows, moving just beyond the edge of the light. They were humanoid, but wrong, their forms shifting and twisting like smoke. And then she heard it a low, guttural whisper, coming from all around her. Blood dead. Clara stumbled back, nearly falling over the edge of the cliff. She ran back to town, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The next morning, she found Jonah waiting for her. He looked pale, his eyes hollow. "It's the gray veil," he said. "It's real, and it's not going to stop until it gets what it wants." Clara spent the day digging through old records in the town hall. She found a journal written by her great-grandfather, detailing a shipwreck a century ago. The townsfolk had lured the survivors to their deaths, stealing their cargo and leaving their bodies to the sea. The fog, the journal claimed, was their vengeance. That night, the fog returned with a vengeance. It seeped into homes, swallowing entire families. Clara and Jonah barricaded themselves in the lighthouse, the only place the fog hadn't reached. But as the hours passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "It wants you," Jonah said, his voice trembling. "It wants all of us." Clara knew what she had to do. She stepped out into the fog, her mother's voice guiding her to the cliffs. The shadows were waiting, their hollow eyes fixed on her. She stood at the edge, the sea roaring below, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The fog surged forward, enveloping her. When Clara awoke, she was alone. The town was silent. the fog gone. But as she walked back to the lighthouse, she felt Ida cold breath on her neck, a whisper in the wind. The fog wasn't done with her, and it never would be.